Ready? Jim? Ready? 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 Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Taneytown Planning Commission for November. Would you please stand for the pledge to the flag?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let the records reflect the members of the commission that are here this evening. Commission members should have received the draft minutes for October 24th, 2022. Is there any corrections or additions to those minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion, we accept.
Okay. Motion made by Mr. Myers. One second. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise? Carried. Thank you.
Jim, who's the second on that?
Bill. Okay, delegations and action items for tonight, the Sewell property, concept plan presentation. Would Darrell or Jim, either one of you lead us off on this?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, the this is a concept site plan presentation. There is no action required tonight. The gentlemen are going to just talk about what they have as a concept. So with us tonight is Marty Hackett with CLSI, and is Kevin here? Okay. Okay, and Clark Schaefer. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
So gentlemen, if you come up to the podium, please. Anyone that will come up later to make a comment, please sign the sheet.
Since we have a pretty good group, would you please keep your comments as brief as possible and to the point? Thank you.
Well, if I could add, just while they're setting up here, so sequence-wise, after the engineer hears any feedback this evening, they'll be developing a community village application for the mayor and council. So it will be up to the mayor and council to designate the property as a community village if they see fit. At that point, the developer will be able to return to the planning commission for consideration of concept approval, but we're still a step away from that.
Okay. Gentlemen, would one of you like to start off?
Yes, sir. Marty Hackett, CLSI, we're the engineer land planner for the project.
I'm Clark Schaefer. I'm the lawyer representing the property owner and the developer.
As Mr. Weeprick stated, this is obviously the very, very beginning of the project. Since it's been annexed, we're here to talk about our concept plan, and we obviously know we have to go through the application process with the city council to ask for the actual community village ordinance to utilize that part of the zoning process. The plan before you tonight has a combination of single-family detached homes and some carriage homes, which are also the fancy word for duplexes. The particular property is obviously right off Harney Road, and we have the two main access points off of Harney Road. One of them is satisfying the comprehensive plan, which has a master plan street on it, and that is the street that's shown at the very bottom of the property, where it goes through, and there's no access points as far as for residential purposes, and everything else is internal. We're proposing a small clubhouse, pool, looking at doing probably bocce courts and stuff like that, and be areas for the people to congregate and meet. In a couple locations, gazebos and pathway systems, and obviously there's sidewalks going to be on both sides of the streets. And we're really here to answer any comments or questions you may have. Anything you want to add, Clark?
Well, I'd just like to say that I think everybody from our side involved in the project realizes this is a long-term project. We anticipate proceeding through your process. We've been annexed, I'm sure you know, and we're zoned. Now we need to see if we can go through the review process to get that or something like that approved. Now, we're not coming to this blind. I mean, we've looked at this project, obviously, and we believe and know that it complies with your, at least the basics of your community village zoning designation. And that's a designation that gives a lot of leeway to the town in terms of its review of the layout and et cetera. As Marty says, we were told early on in the process that there's a master plan street that's planned to come through this property and eventually hit 140. And we asked this commission, maybe not, some of you may not have been on the commission, but we asked this commission, hey, do you still want this road? Because we were like, you know, is this going to be like a bypass, or, you know, you want it? They go, yeah, we want it. We want it available, and we want it built on your dime as part of any development approval of the Sewell property. So that's what's shown here, which would be, if this development is approved and goes through, that road would be built to collector road standards on the developer's dime. There are many other questions that will come up, and we've talked a lot about that, like who's going to own the internal roads? Would you want the developer to own it? The collector street obviously would be a public road that would be publicly maintained. What are you going to do with the open space? I mean, there's a significant amount of potential open space here. What's it, Marty? You have any idea of acreage-wise?
I don't know exactly.
All right, it's a fair amount of open space, conserved property. Would the town want it? We're not getting any indication that the town's got an appetite to take that over and make it a park. But if they did, that could be, you know, that could be done. We would form an HOA, and a homeowners association, to own, manage, and maintain it. Like Marty said, it would have some gazebo-type paths in it that would be reviewed. We also understand that water and sewer and the availability of same is part of this review process. And we also understand that we're going to have to be involved in a water and sewer master plan. And we also understand that we're going to have to pace this with the town's ability to provide water and sewer services. And in fact, all public services. Because once we're in the town, which we're in now, we're subject to all your ordinances, including your adequate public facilities ordinance, your subdivision ordinance, your landscape ordinance, your stormwater ordinance, your water, all those, we know we're going to have to comply with, and we're just starting that process here. We've designed this plan so that, at least in concept, it meets all the basic requirements. The lots are, there's enough, the density meets, the size, the setbacks. We're trying to, obviously, the developer and the owners want a vibrant, working community because they want to sell, when this starts developing, they want to be able to, people say, yeah, I want to live here. This is good. That means driveways, garages set up so they will. This will be an age-targeted development as proposed, meaning that the units will have first floor master suites, and it will have first floor living arrangements. But there will be more space. There will be a second floor or a loft, meaning that we anticipate that the majority of the purchasers will probably be the empty nester types. You know, I don't know, the developers can talk that language, but you know what I mean. We've got, once of our, Marty's got a bunch of, you know, just talk about some designs here, which we can get into either now at your, whenever the appropriate time is to get into that in your process. We understand that architectural review will be part of the town's review. We understand that there'll probably be, what are those things called, Marty? Form books or design guideline books, or what do they call them?
Probably there's gonna be architectural type control book, you know.
You know, most, I don't know how new it is, but there'll be a book that we'll produce, a booklet, that'll show architecturals, and you'll approve it or not approve it. It'll show things like the number of windows, the length of the driveways, the architectural stuff like that. So all that we understand. This is our first step in a long process. And this is the concept that we've come up with, Marty and CLSI, to try to meet this. Oh, one thing I forgot, I'll shut up in 1 minute. We also understand that traffic will be looked at heavily here. We understand that there'll be a traffic study required. We understand that there will be improvements discussed to public roads. We also understand that the intersection of Harney and 140 is a concern and needs to be addressed. This is going to put a significant number of trips into that. There's already a significant amount of trips into that intersection, but this will add, and therefore, under your adequate public facilities ordinances, we will need to address that. We've looked at that preliminarily with State Highway, and we believe that can be addressed. We finally, we think that this collector road and this development coming in a phased fashion will be a plus to the town. Most of these, I don't know the town. I don't know the town obviously as well as you do. I don't live here. I've been up here. I've been around for a while, and I've been up here with various zoning cases. But most of the towns that I've dealt with in Carroll County, my opinion, they crave developable land that's close to their downtown, fairly close, because those disposable incomes and people and rooftops are what will contribute, we believe, to a vibrant community, a community that grows in an orderly fashion. We think this is part of that plan, and obviously the town has agreed with that, at least in concept, that this is this property was listed in your master plan as future annexation, future development, future residential zoning. You know, this is not something that we came up with, you know, and just said, hey, let's take a farm and, put a bunch of units on it. This was in your plan. It was shown as a future growth area, and this is the first step. So appreciate your consideration of it.
Okay. Maybe I'll just start out by asking, do you have a time frame? Are we looking at something 3 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years to finish it out? And secondly, are we doing this in phases?
Yes, sir. It will be done in phases.
It will be phased. I think, we're thinking, to the extent, and we've thought about it, 3 years to start, and then a development period over 4 years, 5 years.
At least.
You know,
It's obviously the absorption rate, depending on the market with, the amount of units are there, you're looking at, it could be anywhere between I would say conservatively a 5 to 8 year project under construction. I mean, you see some that are very similar, I guess. You know what it took for Carroll Vista to get through the construction process. You're seeing it with Meads, that kind of thing. It's not something that happens overnight. As Clark said, the project, the way it's set up, we set it up where right now we've heard at some meetings that maybe the roads may be private instead of public, just so it doesn't burden the town with the cost of maintaining and so on. Similar to like Carroll Vista would be, those are private roads. The developer is flexible, you know, so it's really what the town desires. Normally, the master plan street would be the public road. They're all going to be built to public standards, just because you want the long-term, obviously, integrity of the road to maintain. So you don't want to have to build something cheap and then have to deal with fixing it, you know, in a short period of time. So, we're very flexible with that. And as Clark said, you know, we've already started a traffic study on gathering background data and all. We don't do the traffic study ourselves, but we sub it out, coordinate with them to do that. The product, and like as Clark said, you're looking at the villa style product, which is called a 1.5 story. It's a very similar product to what you would see in Carroll Vista. The difference there is that's all retirement, age restricted, and this is called age targeted. And what it is, it allows, obviously, the market's a lot greater because you're not just restricted to 55 and older. And it also allows younger families that want to come in and have, you know, lifestyle and living with a community, you know, with the pool and the amenities and all that stuff, the open space. That would be and again, you know, it's a very similar product. And then the carriage home or the duplex type style would be very similar to these. They're just joined together, but we're only proposing, like some of the other projects might have 3 units in a row. We're only proposing the two together.
And we're looking like 320?
I think the plan has 322 on it.
What would be y'all's minimum? Like, let's say, you know, one of the promises made by council and mayor as they were talking about the annexation, everything like that, was that the town wasn't going to see 300 houses built here. Obviously, you guys are proposing 320. What would be the minimum to make this a feasible project for y'all?
As far as the minimum goes, I'd have to resort to the developer, the builder developer, and I don't know. I mean, under the zoning of the community village ordinance, it's basically the gross acreage times 2.8 in the R10,000 zone, which comes out, I believe, to 350 units is that. And that in the community village zone would be the permitted density, and then you have a conditional maximum density of 4.0 units per acre, which would obviously put it up over 4.
We're probably around 300 minimum. You know, it's hard to say for sure, but, and not only that, but you can't believe us when we tell you, you know, because, you know, we don't know what the market's going to be.
Totally
We don't know
understand.
what concrete's going to cost. We don't know what asphalt's going to cost, but we're at 300 and a little plus. That's why we put 322 in here. And not only that, but we think it works.
Okay.
Yeah, so when I look at the width of the roads that you have in there, to me, it might meet all the requirements, but it really doesn't look like it's acceptable for fire and rescue operations. So I've seen this happen out at Carroll Vista. So, you know, the plans came in, I think they talked about it, then they built the road the same side, nobody changed anything. Then you had parking on both sides of the road, and then he found out they couldn't get the fire engine down there. So now they have parking on one side of the road, which I think that you have proposed here. So my own personal opinion, I don't think that's fair to whoever lives on either side of the road. I don't think it's fair for you to park in front of my house and my guests can't park in front of my house. I mean, that's stuff like that is, I don't really think that's fair to the folks, and more importantly, the safety of getting a fire engine down there and being able to set up the ladder truck. It's just not enough room. It's just an opinion I have there.
Didn't I read something that there was going to be no parking on the street? It was be all street parking?
That's Garrett, that was the Garrett Ridge said that.
Okay,
This is proposed to have parking on one side. We did a plan that's in the package that showed where, you know, parallel parking could be obtained. We also provided some, which are not, we proposed quite a bit of parking in some areas that are perpendicular parking. And that works all well with the private road system. We could still do it with a public road system because the town only really, they only own from the back of curb to back of curb. So where the curb, like any of these perpendicular spaces would go outside of the right of way, and that it would be on private property. They would only maintain so we're really set up to do it either way. As far as the width goes, when we did Carroll Vista, I know it was approved and it was supposed to have parking only on one side. That was the way it was set up, for the specific reason of making sure there's, you know, it's a 24-foot road with the 16-foot maintained off the parallel parking for any type of emergency apparatus. But, and again, you know, this is the very beginning, so you know, we can all talk about that.
So even if you have 16 foot for two-way traffic, I mean, that's, that's not a whole lot of space to drive. If you drive up and down the streets here, it's,
I understand, and that's done intentionally only because
it slows people down.
that's correct. It does. And I don't know if there's been any accidents in Carroll Vista, but most of the time, the travel speeds are slower and there's not as many. So that's,
Understand.
Yeah, we get it.
Yes.
We understand that'll be looked at.
Yes, safety for the fire equipment is the biggest concern I have. That's all.
now we did on the master plan street, we did a 24-foot road there, but there's no houses accessing it or anything like that. So most likely there would just be no parking along that road. You'd have two 12-foot lanes, basically.
Understand.
Okay?
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, so I was, like you guys, reading the requirements for the community village there. And so it states in there about should be a fencing plan. I mean, do you have like a plan on what fencing is, or would that be, maybe that's a question for us. Does it just follow our normal ordinances for fence, or? Because it kind of implied like it's a separate fencing plan that needed to be presented.
Community village, that is part of the plan, is that a more aesthetic consideration is given so that there might be, you know, 2 or 3 different fence types allowed, or, you know, that much like they talked about, there would be a pattern book that would show the architecture, same sort of thing for fences, retaining walls, you know, that sort of amenity or things down the road. So the idea is to avoid a hodgepodge of a variety of fence types. So you won't look out the backyard or from the open space and see, you know, one house has a stockade fence, the next house has a vinyl fence that are 6 feet, the next house has a 4-foot split rail. The idea is to have some consistency, some uniformity through the community, because everything is more compact in a community village.
So that'd be the style of the house, but they would still have to meet the ordinances that we have for the 6-foot 5.
Right, they would still need to meet the ordinance, but the community village can be more restrictive than the ordinance. It can say that, you know, to be in this community, we're only going to approve these 3 types of fences, or, you know, however many it may be, but there's supposed to be a plan that has some aesthetic consideration and provides some degree of uniformity.
Yeah, that's what's called a pattern book. I couldn't remember. It's called a pattern book, and it's almost like a homeowners association that you approve.
right, but the HOA will be controlling that by themselves, too separate from us.
Exactly. But the pattern book will be binding on the development
With us.
through you, yeah.
Yes.
Through you, right.
So when it comes before us, we'll have a chance to make decisions or recommendations to that.
So it also said in there that there's no sheds in this area here, so I assume that's, are we going to stick with that, or are we going to change our mind again? I don't know.
I think that's something that can be brought up later on, other than in what we're looking at tonight. since tonight is a presentation.
Yeah, I just went through it and made a bunch of notes, so.
My main concern, again, with the presentation is just going to be, you know, when they're going through the annexation process and everything like that, a lot of the concerns were we were going to see the 300-plus house development going in. And, you know, the developer's obviously going to want those 300-plus houses. So this is obviously going to be something that the council and mayor are going to have to talk about when they go for the community village part. But, you know, this isn't what they basically assured that this isn't what we were going to see when you guys came with the concept plan.
Yeah.
That is what they told the people when they went for the annexation process, is that we weren't going to see a 300-plus house development.
This is pretty much what was presented originally.
It is.
Pretty much the same design.
Concept plan in for a year,
No, I totally agree.
and it was on file, so.
That one had 334 units on it, I believe.
No, I totally agree. I'm just telling you what was told at the mayor and council when they were talking about the annexation, was that, I actually think it was the mayor himself, was we were not going to see 300 houses built on this development.
Well, we don't know.
And I know it's not on you guys. I totally understand it's not on you guys. I'm just
Mr.
telling you-
Miller, I know that you are running for mayor, but I would greatly appreciate if you would stop making a generalization about the entire council claiming the 300, because it's not true, and I appreciate you not fabricating things for the sake of trying to pander to your
The
people who
300
might vote
houses.
for you.
It wasn't true that that was said, that there wasn't going to be 300
You
houses on this
said,
development.
and the council. I did not.
All right, let's move forward for what we have with the presentation. Thank you for both of your
I have a
input.
question for Mr. Weeprek, and I don't expect an answer tonight. First of all, question. This is going to come before the council. When was it to come before the council for the sake of the community village overlay request? Is there a timeline on that, or just it's sometime in the future?
At this point, I would say sometime in the future. I'm not sure what the developer's intent is there. There may be some tweaking of the concept that needs to happen before it's ready for the application to mayor and council.
Okay. Do you all have any idea when you might be bringing that?
We're gonna get your we're gonna, maybe not tonight, but at another meeting, we're obviously gonna go through you and get some kind of recommendation for or against, depending on what we tweak here. Maybe we'll make some changes. After that point would be when we go to the council. My guess is that could take 3 to 4 months, 5 months. I mean,
Probably around.
you know.
So, Mr. Weeper, question for you, and I don't know what would be an appropriate amount of time. I'm looking for an answer and then I guess a forecast. During the annexation talks, when we were talking about annexing the land only, there was talk about water capacity and sewer, and I forget which number was which number. One was 83%, one was 87%, and I know Carroll County and the state likes it at 80. I also like it at 80 or below. I know there's a lot of infrastructure work done, especially with the ARPA funds, and so I'm wondering, once again, this is homework, not something for right now. When might new numbers be acquired based on infrastructure work completed thus far? What's a forecast for, let's say, a year out, year and a half, 2 years out? And let's say all of this work were to decrease those numbers to, let's say, 72 and 75%. So we're below the 80 as a critical point. With Garnet Ridge being 50 units, this being 320, that's 370 as a possible development. So what's the estimate as to where would we be down the road if all of those homes went in? Will we then be up at 90? Because I'm not sure what would that look like in terms of units from 72% capacity back up to 80. So if that can be something on the back burner information, I think that would greatly help me as one to understand planning.
Right, those projections are in the works as part of the triennial update for the water and sewer master plan. And at this point, they are largely projections because as several of you are aware, the mayor and council did just award 2 major projects that will have a big impact on the water and sewer, on the reduction of inflow and infiltration into the sewer collection system. And that's where a lot of our capacity goes right now. But those projects were just awarded, so we'll need to wait and see after they're in the ground what it does for our flows to really have data as opposed to projections.
Well, maybe just to tap a little bit on that. At what point would we look at the adequate public facility ordinance And also, how does that fit in with the amending the water and sewer plan with the county? I mean, whereabouts does that take place?
So the adequate public facilities ordinance is a component of the preliminary plan stage. So when the engineer gets into designing the stormwater management and, gets into all the nitty-gritty engineering work, that's when we take the first measure of the adequate facilities.
Okay.
That is cycled through a second time at the final subdivision stage. So what we see frequently is the preliminary plan addresses the entire site, and we run through the adequate public facilities there. We look at school capacity, water, sewer, park capacity, traffic, things of that nature. And then that's usually done for the entire site. And then as far as the phasing goes, the first phase will develop construction drawings and recordation plats. At that point, we can run that phase through the adequate facilities review another time. It depends on how quickly it happens. If it happens right on the heels of a preliminary plan approval, and 2 months later, we're looking at plats, it probably isn't necessary to rerun those tests. But if it takes another year, then we can cycle through those adequate facilities reviews a second time. And, if things have, if other developments, say that feed to Francis Scott Key High School have come online or have advanced through the planning process, those numbers may change for a project here in the city. So it's largely related to the timing, but we do have that opportunity to run it through at the preliminary and final subdivision steps.
Yeah, that's an excellent description of the process. But, and an excellent question, but the reality is that the developer will be looking at that process, the adequate facilities, especially water and sewer, okay, as we go through. And if it doesn't look good, they're not gonna go forward. I mean, because they're spending a lot of money to go through your review process. And as Jim just pointed out, the APFO, the real rubber hits the road when you get to the preliminary plan and then the final plan, because that's when you're getting close to actually getting building permits, okay? And that's obviously when people really care. And that's when you should look at your APFO, because if there's no adequate facilities then. So, yes, it'll be toward the end of the process, but everybody will be keeping their eye on it as we go through. For obvious reasons. The town's got challenges as far as water and sewer, and they're gonna have to allocate. And, the bottom line is that we're gonna have to meet all your requirements, either now or then, let's say 3, 4, when we get ready, 3 years from now or 4 years from now, and we're ready to go. If we don't meet them, we're not recording and we're not selling. It could be a year delay. It could, because sometimes that happens. Could be 6 months delay. But these projects they're not like the old days. Maybe there is no more old days, but they're a long time. They're a long time coming. Lots of money spent. Lots of review. I know some people aren't happy. They think the process doesn't work, but it may not work. But it's not because it's not looking at stuff. I mean, there's stuff being looked at in terms of every gallon of water, both wastewater and potable water. Everyone's getting counted. I think you all know that now up here now. We know it in Westminster, every gallon.
We're aware of how long it takes to get a project up and running. I mean, 10, 12 years for mean crossing, so
Yeah.
it doesn't happen overnight.
So I have a couple more, concerns here. When I review everything here. So, you talk about water and sewer, everybody understand that process. Everybody talks about that. You talked about the traffic at the intersection down there. Got that. Everybody talks about that. So, yeah, they all need to be looked at. The other thing that concerns me is just the traffic situation in town, like right outside the door here. I mean, we have a lot of traffic during rush hour now. It's crazy compared to when I grew up. It's just crazy. So that's a concern I have, we're adding extra vehicles to the, and I don't know what you can do about that. Maybe a bypass would help that, but that's a concern that I have. Of course, the water situation, I mean, you talk about that, but I mean, I know when they put in Carroll Vista and they started using the wells out there, the neighbors had issues, so whether they went away or how they were resolved, I don't know, but, so that's another concern. Even after you meet the qualifications, what effect do you have on the neighbors, So I have that concern. The other thing I talked about, the roads, the road width for the fire. Well, the other concern is that just the fire service in general, we're volunteer here, we're basically strapped, and I mean, it's very difficult to get, a couple engines out in the middle of the day. And so we're adding this extra requirement for fire service that we don't have, the ability to service it really. So the county's working on it, I got it, everybody's trying to, we're trying to go paid, but it's still a concern. And whether they all come together at the same time or not, I don't know. But again, that's just a concern that I have. So then I'm also, when we had a presentation from our economic director, what was that, 2-3 months ago, whatever. So what I heard from him was that we should have businesses in town before the residential development. So, I mean, I don't really see that happening, but I thought that was the advice that he gave us. So that's a concern that I have. And then, I'm kind of new to this. I'm reading the books on what the Planning Commission is supposed to do and everything. So one of the things that kind of resonated with me is that when we're making a change, we're supposed to consider how it affects the current residents and whether this is going to be a benefit to them or not. And so I know you said you thought it would be. I'm not sure I'm in that camp yet. So those are some current concerns that I have here. I just appreciate you listening to me.
Well, you put your finger on the growth issues that Taneytown faces and everybody faces. And how do you pay for it? And then, with regard to your traffic concern about, out front here, that's an existing problem. And the question becomes, who pays to fix that?
Yeah.
Do you just say, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, you want to get a building permit for your daughter on that lot next to your house? Sorry, you're going to put another trip into Main Street. We can't have it. We're overcrowded and we're not allowing any more development. And then you get into the question, well, this one obviously is a big one. And this one has got a little sign on its head that says, this is a big one. So people are looking at it heavily, and those questions do come up, and they're big questions. When is the town ready for growth? But I will say this: this is not the old days. In the old days, there were no adequate facilities. When a lot of this development got done up here, there wasn't adequate facilities ordinances. They didn't look at it. Now they do, and they actually look at, for instance, the capacity of the cafeteria at the elementary school. And they look at the capacity of the gym and the classrooms, and they have percentages. And again, the question is, when the new guy moves in, everybody knows that the new guy or gal is going to be in front of you at the traffic light one day, and you might not get through. And they're also going to be at the library, and maybe you'll have to wait an extra to get your book. But they're also going to be on your Little League teams. They're going to start your theater groups. They might even run for mayor one day.
I don't think 55 and older is not going to be on my Little League team.
Well, this is going to be age targeted. There'll be coaches.
Okay.
And so, I get it.
Yeah.
But this is phased so that it comes in so you can handle it. And again, it's an existential question. You want to grow or no? I mean, this farm is a pretty nice opportunity for something. I mean, I'm a land use lawyer, been one for 40 years. When you look at land, you look at where the path of development is. And there's certain farms that are not in the path of development. I mean, there's other ones that are. But anyway, that's a question for you guys to deal with as you go forward.
Are they going before the neighborhood commu, are they going before the neighborhood communities before coming back to planning and zoning? Because I know he mentioned that he wanted to get a yes or a no on the concept right before you went to.
We want to get some recommendations from you, or we want to try to get to a point with you where you can recommend our concept plan to the mayor and council. At which time we will ask the mayor and council to designate this as appropriate for a community village. If they do that, we'll be back your way with the detailed plans and the detailed reviews we've talked about, yeah.
Well, I perceive that you'll come back before us again before we make any comments other than recommendations
Yes.
for the concept.
Yes.
I mean, this is just a presentation. We want to get input from up here and input from the community. So we want to make sure we can hear things and understand what's happening before we have to make a decision and obligate anyone. Lee, you had a question?
Yeah, Mr. Hackett, question for you. In that property there, it's 126 acres, correct?
Yes, sir.
That green zone, that's the 126? That's what it's showing? Or is there, that outline, that's the 126? My question, and I think we've had this discussion in the past and maybe in other developments. I see two areas there, what is that, north and south, right on the property lines. What is your thought, what is your process for a buffer or open space? You know, you see it on the north and you see it on the south towards Route 140. They're right on the property lines. What I'm asking is, how are you going to design it for a buffer? You know, instead of just seeing when you come out 140 or Harney Road and all of a sudden you're going to see it all. Do you see what I'm asking? Is there going to be a buffer to the neighboring farms, you know, or is it going to be farmed in a property line?
So far,
That one and on Route 140, you know?
Them houses are going right up beside our property.
I'm just asking, Mr. Hackett, and I think we've had that issue with other
yes.
developments in Taneytown. You know, I've lived here for almost 40 years now.
Yeah.
And I think we should address it now as you're in front of us, and I think it should be looked at from your
We
company.
can certainly do that.
And it just, you see what I'm saying? Instead of just plotting those houses out in the property line, then it's a beautiful farm on the other side. Sewell's property is a beautiful farm, don't get me wrong. But you can't forget about the farms around it and, you know, the neighbors all around there. There's going to be 300 and potentially over 300 houses. I'm just asking, you know, just
Certainly
make a
look at
note, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if you notice the master plan street on the bottom of the property, there's a buffer there between the master plan street because it's a street and obviously we're
Right.
trying to separate the area that is along that other area. And I know if you notice up on the board, how those, the Garnet Ridge property.
I see it.
How those two sort of just blend together.
Yeah, we'll look at
But
it.
we can certainly look
Yeah,
at it.
because we get the comment, and apparently there's somebody here that that has a comment also.
It's not just because it's just something that's been brought up to me, and it's a shame, and there's some people in the community that has been addressed on other developments here, that all of a sudden you're going from a development to farmland that used to be beautiful. Now that farmer there is looking at houses. Don't get me wrong, growth is part of it, but I think it should be addressed and looked at.
Yeah, right now, again, we had the lot shown right up to the property line. The setback there is, I think, and it says about 40 feet off the property.
Okay.
The area to the back, and obviously, some of that green space toward the top.
Okay?
And that floodplain continues on, obviously, to the adjacent properties. And I believe part of your farm has the floodplain on it. Yeah. But we can certainly look at it.
Sure.
think we had the same situation with Meads Crossing
Yes.
and Angel Road.
Yes.
That there was comments we needed more of a buffer. And I agree with you that that's something you need to look at.
Yeah, the houses, like the ones that are at the bottom of the property up against, that run parallel to 140.
140.
You know, those are, my guess is 1,500 feet away.
Okay,
The roadway's 1,500 feet. Some of those properties are zone commercial.
okay,
But like the one that's located just directly where the master plan street's going on the bottom side of it.
right, right.
So, you know, again, we can certainly
Yeah,
take a
we'll
look
look
at
at
it.
it. We're familiar with it.
'Cause
We know that it's a problem for farmers when people go, what do you mean?
Yeah.
You know, you're fumigating it, you know, at this time of year, I'm having a party, you know,
Good point, Bill.
We've,
We want to make it look nice instead of just plotted in the middle of a piece of farmland.
so running along Harney Road, we got the green space there. We're gonna be doing berming, landscaping and all that to try to, you know, sort of shield, try to keep it more of a scenic byway of Harney Road. So they're not just, you know, looking at the backs of houses, there'll be berms and landscaping. And some of that, obviously the details of that, whether it's gonna have, you know, a white vinyl fencing along it with landscaping on both, that's all part of the review and
I think you didn't have the figure, but you said out of the 126 acres, house-wise, how many acres is used of houses to open space is left over? You said there's some floodplain or areas, you know what I mean?
I can give you all those acres.
Okay.
Yeah,
You said you didn't have it, but, you know, this is the first meeting.
we can break it down, yes, sir.
Yeah,
Well, let's be sure we're right on the acreage here, because we got two pieces to this annexation. The one's on the right-hand side of Harney Road, that's not part of this development.
okay?
Okay, the piece on the left, I think that's less than 120, no, it's 8.8 plus 107, so it's about 115,
Okay.
116 on that side of the road, okay?
Okay.
Okay, and then
Thank you.
you could do the math and figure out the density.
Okay.
And now the open space, we'll get that info for you.
Okay.
Is that where the 350 comes from? The
50 what?
the maximum that it has on here, the 350?
No, it
Does that
doesn't come from
include-
that. It just comes from the fact that we felt like that was legally allowed, less than legally allowed slightly, and would allow a development that we felt was a reasonable design, you know?
So I'm confused now. See, it says 126 and a quarter acres. Is that the green space?
No, it's the entire property. But it's all the parcels that this whole zone.
But on the right side of that Harney Road is not part of that 120, of,
116 on that
okay.
left side.
116.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's about 116 and change, yep.
got it.
Okay.
So you used both sides of the road to get the total area. You figured out how many houses, then you
And
crammed them
again,
into that
we may
area.
have to change that to just the one side. I mean, that's,
Yeah,
we're showing what the maximum, I mean, we show the whole acreage. I mean, that is that's everything that got annexed into the
Sure.
project, so, or the property, so, we can make those adjustments accordingly.
I got it.
Thank you.
The west end of your project, I'm concerned that there's no egress out of that area.
Where, Jim?
I mean, right now, anyone on that end will have to come out to Harney Road. That's a lot of development back there with not an egress.
I was going to be Garnet Ridge.
Yeah, there's
Well, according to that, that's going to be a private road.
That's what was
That's
said.
what's in here. So if that goes non-profit, we going to be allowed, are you going to allow it? I mean, that's something you have to decide. That development's going to be able to go across a private road, another development, to get to 140?
Jim, it's showing right there.
The roads that are in
It does,
Garnet
but
Ridge,
that's a private road.
Yeah, we just seen
So
this.
I'm saying is, if the rest of the development is public, are we going to allow the public to dump onto a private road through another development? Somebody want to help me on that a little bit?
That is definitely an issue that needs to be fleshed out. We had a similar situation with Chevrolet Drive and Break Iron Street. where those streets were not built to city specifications with the intent that they remain private. And then when the Creekside community was going through the review process and was not able to access Route 140 on that side of the project, and the alternative was to access via Break Iron Street, then the city ended up stepping in and accepting those as public streets. And then we, as you know, we now have city streets that weren't built to city specs, so they don't have sidewalks on both sides and so on. So it's definitely a matter that we need to figure out, and I don't know if there's been any coordination with the developer or builder for Garnet Ridge at this point, if there's some agreement in the works on, a shared use of those streets or anything, but definitely a question that we need to have answers for.
Yes.
What he was referring to is the situation out behind, there in front of Food Line and CVS.
Yes.
There with the
Right.
work tower. So, just don't want to recreate
Yep.
another situation.
Yeah.
So if you could look into that.
Yep.
So do we folks have any more comments before I open it up to the floor?
I do not.
If not, I'll open up for comments from the floor. There again, please come up and put your name and address and try to keep your points to the, your comments to the point.
We go with 3 minutes?
I'm not sure, I got a lot of notes here, so I will be as brief and to the point as possible.
If it's too
but I do have-
long-winded, I'll give you the signal.
Yeah, give me the hook, Mr. Parker, that'd be good. Chris Tillman, 10 York Street. And I do have a number of comments I'd like to make regarding this plan. I think the first thing that came up to me when they were talking about a public collector road through the site, I believe that at the time that they were trying to refer to maintaining some semblance of roadbed for a future bypass to continue from 140 around to 194. Certainly what is planned here doesn't do that. And I think that needs to be looked at because, right now, even the bypass that is in our plan, even if it's in the state plan, still only covers 140 and does nothing for 194. And the only way to actually alleviate that traffic is to continue that bypass on around and come out somewhere over probably by Fringer Road. But, we're going to find ourselves in that same spot 20 years from now if we don't plan for that today. So that I think is what was intended there. I have, just aesthetically, I have a lot of issue with this. It seems very unimaginative. It ignores the topography, the existing features of the land. And really, the streets look like racetracks, and they will function very much in that way. I'm certain all you have to do is talk to the folks, in the communities here now in town that are complaining about speeds and stop sign issues in their developments. Buffers to the adjacent property the gentleman brought up a little while ago. In this plan, there's a buffer along Harney Road, but that's it. There's no buffer to any of the adjacent properties. It really does need to be. Intersection improvements at Baltimore Street, we talked about that, and that's going to be a state highway issue. As we well know, sometimes the state highway is not quite on plane with our thinking in terms of what needs to be done, but certainly that intersection needs to be substantially improved. And if you're going to, especially now we've already added a number of houses to it at Taneytown Crossing, and now you're talking about adding another 320 houses. The other thing that you kind of have to look hard at, if you don't know what you're looking at, you don't realize it. And there was some discussion about here at the end about the connection through the Garnet Ridge plan development. And then again, that is also the same, because I think that comes out somewhere right about where the bypass is supposed to tie back in to 140. If there is any thought about continuation, and we don't want to be talking about Garnet Ridge right now, but that ought to be a thought, and maybe that becomes part of a collector road thing, and there's some kind of redistribution of the houses on that property. We also talked about adequate facilities, but one of the things that you don't see are adequate recreational facilities. There's no tennis courts, there's no ball fields, there's no playgrounds. You know, again, knowing that it's a concept plan, they haven't got to that level of detail, but obviously there's things that need to be added for that. I have a question that kind of goes out to more in general to planning and zoning. Is there a potential for any mixed-use development here? You know, one of the things that you know, when you talk about village concepts and stuff like that, you know, is there a possibility for including a gas station and a small convenience store as part of this, so that they don't have to go all the way to Sheets through the intersection just to get, you know, a gallon of gas and a gallon of milk? It's just a thought. I'm not professing for it one way or another, but I just wonder if that had been thought about, if there's been any thought given to that kind of mixed use into something this big in an area of town that is completely unserved by any of that kind of commercial use. Another question I have is, you know, you've got a large number of small lots. Would it not be preferable from a design and construction standpoint to concentrate some of these down to townhouses and perhaps create more open space by clustering townhouses, and instead of having all of these speedways have, you know, like pods of townhouse clusters? Again, just a thought, but it's something to think about, because this just seems to me to be very, very cookie cutter. You know, we talked about the APFO and making sure that adequate facilities are there, and that includes, like, say, fire and police, as well as water and sewer, as well as traffic capacity through the main intersection in town. You know, it begs the question: if this is a phased development, or could future phases be held up by if Garnet Ridge comes on and something else happens in the meantime while this is going on, and suddenly you don't have the capacity to build the last 3 phases of this, or the last 2 phases of this? What does that do to the developer? And that is the end of my list of questions. So I thank you for your time, and I hope that you give some consideration to my comments. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Thank you, sir. Anyone else would like to come forward?
I have something I wanted to give you copies of. May I pass them out to you? I'm Jim Thomas. Just take one of each of these.
You have a copy for us?
I think once you're at the other end, there should be a copy there, I think. If not, I'll get you one. First thing I wanted to address from Ms. Eisenberg, but the buffer is actually in your own comprehensive plan. It's a required buffer of 30 feet, so it's not a matter of preferences in that way. That's written within your ordinances. And on the Hawn Farm particularly, and this is the issue that needs crossing along this line that's been pointed out, that is spelled out within your own within your own plan, that's a 30-foot buffer requirement.
I'm sorry, Jim. Go ahead.
So I'm saying that's you're right about that.
He said it was 40.
So what I handed you is just a comparison of the original sketch plan with the latest concept plan that's presented tonight. And you can see from the original plan the changes on the west end of the property here. I superimposed the existing tree line on the property on both those plans, which you don't see. Well, I guess it's sort of implied tree line. So in the sketch plan, you could see that this was shifted way up this direction. There was a footpath coming here that wrapped around the property, tied in with the creek to provide a nice footpath along here, for example. So with this newer plan now, there'll be more woods that are going to be cut down. I'm not sure if the county requires mitigation for that in terms of the forest plan to do that somewhere else. But one of the things that's always pointed out within your own plan is that you work with the strength of your own property and the assets of the property. So it's disappointing to see this plan, both as Chris pointed out, from a topographical standpoint. It's a beautiful piece of property. So you wipe out 14 acres of woods, stream buffers taken care of by other requirements. One thing I wanted to suggest was, instead of getting locked into this concept plan and tweaking it and making it fit, what if you requested the developer 3 soft concept plans? So you don't get locked into this and you keep manipulating something that maybe doesn't even work in the beginning and get locked into something which doesn't address these other concerns. So one of the things from a more creative standpoint I'd mentioned earlier was, with that earlier sketch plan, if you follow Piney Creek over, this goes to Bollinger Park, right? Also, if you're aware, by 2025, the county has plans for a rails to trail designation at Angel Road up to they purchased land on the Pennsylvania border for a 6-mile rails to trails equestrian trail. Their goal is to tie that into Bollinger Park. So what if there's a system here? Because one of the things in your own plan again is how to get pedestrians downtown on foot or by bicycle. That is in your plan. There's no concept plan over the whole town to address that, much less you have this great opportunity to do these things. Tie in Bollinger Park, a linear park here, tie in the rails to trails to Bollinger Park, and from an economic development standpoint, it's crucial to get that rails to trails downtown. Because you can look across the nation where there are so many economic development opportunities when those rails to trail systems are terminated in the town in terms of restaurants, bike rentals, and repairs. So again, there's all these opportunities that are totally being missed, I believe. So I think if you take one step back, request other soft plans, and it's very good, don't worry about your ordinances yet. Just try to get a concept plan that maybe has some creativity and uses the strength of this property, and then start focusing now. If you do that too soon, I just think you miss, again, these tremendous opportunities for something really much more creative here. The last thing, and this is a question for Jim, I think, and maybe what Chris addressed, in your update of the 2020 comprehensive plan, are there things that will be changed in that which will apply to this development in some way? Because now we're basing these decisions, I'm assuming, on 2010, and I don't even know if it's what that means and what the implications are.
So that's part of what tonight's conversation will be on is one of the recommendations in the 2010 plan was a review of zoning and development regulations. And we'll be talking, we may not get to that this evening, but that's part of our update of the Chapter 3, where we review the recommendations from the 2010 plan, kind of measure where we are in regard to those recommendations and whether, if we didn't meet them, are they still recommendations that we see as beneficial? So that's part of our conversation with the update. So I suspect I won't be surprised if there continues to be a recommendation to update development regulations.
So basically, it is possible that if those recommendations are continued, that will impact this process. Is that fair to say?
I think that's a different timeline. I would imagine that depending upon how the mayor and council receive a community of the village application, if this does end up with a concept formally submitted for approval, then it would be governed by the regulations in place currently or at that point in time. So even if a development regulation was changed a year from now, if a project is already in the pipeline, so to speak, they'll be subject to the set of regulations in place when they came into the process.
So lastly, and this is from my involvement in Meads Crossing related to the village concept plan. As many of you are aware, besides the change in the density requirements based on the lots based on the total acreage of the property versus the buildable acreage, which would reduce, as you were suggesting, Chris, would reduce the number of available lots. And then there's negotiations that occur in that process based on sort of a tit for tat where the town allows this increased density in exchange for certain amenities. And so what happened in Meads Crossing is basically that the developer was given the increased density, but didn't require the developer to follow up on any reciprocation on what was supposed to be included in that agreement. So I just want to make sure as you all negotiate this, you're aware that there needs to be a conversation about the things you want to see that can be traded off in that way. I know it's up to the mayor and council, but with your feedback on things that you want to see put there that are important to you, it will be part of those negotiations. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, Lisa Crawford, 61 West Baltimore Street. I think that, again, and I don't know how much of you know about Jim, but not only is he an acupuncturist and conservationist, but he started out as an architect. Correct me if I'm wrong. So there's a lot of knowledge there. So not only do I back up what was previously said, but I call bull on checking on the schools. I'm a parent with a young child in your school system right now. Our school system is extremely overloaded. What is this going to do? And don't tell me they're going to give us more teachers. It's a bunch of bull. Our middle school is so undersized, there is no way. The teachers are stretched. There are problems with the children that they have to deal with that they should not have to. And not everybody can afford to send their kids to private school. So my child is currently going to Elmer Wolf. I signed off on out of district for him, so I drive him. It's much calmer school. There's not a lot of building out Union Bridge at the moment, so they don't have those worries. And it is amazing the difference in how the teachers are able to teach at that school versus Taneytown. And we really have a big problem right now at our middle school, and it's coming up for my child and many other people's children. It's not big enough. The hallways are like I'm claustrophobic when I walk in there, let alone you get a lot of smelly teenagers or preteens in there. It's ridiculous. This concept is not taking that into consideration at all. By the way, I rode my bike here. So I love that he brought up the bikes trail, because where I come from, we had one of those. Again, that's not being taken into consideration. Once upon a time, I was on the Parks and Rec Committee. We had talked about bikes and trails, and we have. Every spring, summer, and fall, we have a biking group that meets down at Union Memorial Park. They come past my house, they go through town, and actually it's funny because my late husband and I, we had a 5-mile route that we did after we had the kids to lose weight and stay in shape, and I had little one on the back of my bike, and they took over my trail. You know, we'd pass each other and wave. That's not being taken advantage of either. The biking is, it is proven that it brings business to downtown communities. We have new ones. We have a lot of others in the works from what I hear. I'm disappointed that so much is packed in to such a little space. And I'm very curious, and I called to know today, and it was too last minute, so I didn't really expect an answer back. But when it comes to traffic lights, I mean, the last study was crap. It was done in the middle of the day. It was not done in dawn times. I live at 61 West Baltimore Street. I'm fairly aware of the backup. I'm thankful I don't live at this end. The backup is even worse during the day. So who actually, is it the developers that pay for that to be done? Is it the state? Is it the county? Is it the town? Who pays for the traffic study? Where does that come from?
So the way that's supposed to work, and that's something that I'd hope to talk to Mr. Hackett about after offline, the developer funds the traffic study, but it's the traffic engineer is the choice of the city. So
seems a little
we get to
convoluted to me.
choose who we hire, and the developer pays for it.
Okay, so in choosing that, how much do we have to say about when those study times happen? Because they certainly did not happen at appropriate times for the last 2 construction projects.
And when we get to that point to be talking about a traffic study, there's also a review of what intersections are going to be studied in there. So
And at what time of
we
day?
have some say on.
At what time of days?
And they look at it peak hours. That's pretty much standard, is they look
it
at
wasn't
AM and
last time.
PMs.
It was not done at peak hours.
They're not only required to do it on certain days, they're required to do it in certain hours.
Schools are in session.
And I can tell you that they're not allowed to do it when schools are out of session. I can tell you that just recently, I had a client that did one, that according to all the scoping, you know, you must do it on these days, you know, It came back and the government said, and this was Carroll County, they said, we don't think it's good, too low, COVID. You know, do more counts. So it's not a random thing now.
It seemed to be last time, because I came up and I questioned it wasn't during one of the planning sessions, but it was during a city council meeting. So that's why I'm bringing it up, because I questioned them thoroughly, and it happened to be done in the afternoon, not at peak hours, not when the trucks were going through from working, not when the city school buses were going, not when people were coming out from work. In fact, Daniel Haynes, he mentioned to me, oh, well, it was showed that there's not that much traffic. I live down there. Yes, there is. So it was done at a non-peak period. So that's why the question's coming up. That might be a requirement, but that's not what we saw happen in the last development. So how do we make sure that that happens with this, and who's held accountable for that? Is it the developer? Is it the town?
I don't know how the last one was done, so I don't know. But yeah, I can tell you that there's requirements on it. Yeah.
When time comes for that interview, we'll make sure, we'll make comments to them, right, Jim?
Yes.
So it'll be addressed.
It's
There
called
will be a
there's
scoping exercise, right?
And at the scoping meeting, Jim and his consultant, if he has one, they scope the traffic study. They tell which intersections need to be looked at. They tell when the counts need to be taken. And it's given that they're taken in peak hours, but the one thing that they can say is, we want Saturday counts too. And, you know, it's a whole engineering, I mean, it really is people poo-poo them, but it's a well-developed system to evaluate traffic and its effect on intersection. I think people might say, well, the government doesn't take them into account the correct way, but the engineering is pretty good. You know, they count.
Well, I questioned the engineering extensively. He got up at the council meeting and I questioned him. I think Jim was here when I questioned him what time hours it happened. Because, and again, one of our council members referenced back to that study and said, oh, we're fine. No, we really are not fine. And he actually referenced back to the last study, and I referenced to how it was done because I was here and I asked extensive questions. So I understand that's supposed to be set up a certain way, but how it's set up and how it's done can be two different things.
Understand
I also
what you're saying.
understand, thank you. I also wanted it to be noted, and I had said this before, how it affects agriculture around. I know that when the senior community went in, there was ag land around that. There are some that are still having problems. I helped out an elderly couple. They had 2 horses. They had 3. You know, people come in from the city. Ooh, there's a cow. Ooh, there's a horse. And they kill them because they come up and they feed them right along the side of the road. And I actually chased, well, I didn't chase. I won't put it quite that way. But I had to approach, my son was maybe 6 at the time, and we were there helping cleaning out stalls and feeding the horses. And it was not actually the citizens that lived there, but their children and grandchildren. And it's fine, you want to come up and see the horses. But you don't just feed horses anything, especially if on their special diet and they're old. Then there's also the cows. I know a lot of people out here, and even from the community that currently went in, they're having problems because people, oh, it's a cow, let's go look. You know, let's feed them stuff. You know, is there anything the town can do to place signs to help protect the agricultural that is still going to be around that area? Because not only is the water and draining of wells a huge concern, but also an ag. And I had a city council member tell me, we have enough agricultural around here. We get our food from China and India and every place else, and we have enough ag? I'm sorry, I have to disagree about that. So how do we protect, when things like this come in, how do we protect those farmers that are still there? What can we do for them also? Because it's not right that their wells get drained dry, and then we end up with these big, huge farms that we're not getting good produce and we're not getting good meat from. So I don't think that's something that's come up in the discussion. I certainly haven't heard it. I know it's impacted farmers in several different communities that were built. And it's sad because they work hard. They don't make a lot of money unless they sell their land. And it's in ag preservation. And even then, they're really not treated right. And it's very, very sad. I do know that it will change things on my street. We bought at that end of the town for the reason because it was a lot quieter. It will change things exponentially. I think it was mentioned open space and what will also be provided for, they're going to be using things here in town, right? We have, there's a pool that went into a private community, but yet the kids in town don't have a pool to go to. So if this is accepted, and again, I like the concept of several different plans being opened because, it should be fair. It should be fair to the farmers around there. It should be fair to the community. And we don't want to shut off businesses, especially if it closes up the rails to trails coming in. That would be amazing. We have bikers that do races that come in every single year. And I've often said, you put the right things downtown, they'll stop for juices and coffee and this and that. We don't have it. So I would ask that you hopefully consider more of this because a lot of it is shut down, quite frankly, at council meetings.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am?
My name's Lydia Stedman at 3407 Harney Road. And I share the driveway with Ron Stoll. We're opposite his driveway. I guess I've never been to a meeting like this before, so I have no idea.
Just say what's on your mind.
But Harney Road is very busy, and my concern is the traffic, and especially since we're opposite the entrance to that facility that they're planning. Also, I'm wondering what it's going to do to my property value. I don't know if it's going to increase my value or diminish my property value. I don't know which way that's going to go. And I think the main thing is the traffic for me. We moved our bedroom to the back bedroom rather than the front bedroom because it's so noisy. So I kind of feel sorry for the people that are going to be on Harney Road. There's a lot of trucks, tractor trailers coming down that road. And I'm curious about this side. Are there any future plans that include that side? I know it's not in the concept here.
There are no future plans. It'll be owned by the Sewells, and then they'll see what they do with it. They're not going to farm. They're not going to have a Christmas tree farm on it. I know that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Just, where does the speed limit change going out Harney Road? Does that change after Souls from 30 or?
I think it's
Alexander's, is that where it changed? Goes up to what, 40? 40. Well, they give us 7, we take 12, I understand. Yeah. Okay. All right, anyone else? Do I have to see another hand?
Harry Mead, 102 Baumgartner. I just kind of wanted to reiterate a lot of the things that have already been said, kind of. It does kind of look like just another cookie cutter thing. It's like when I was looking at Mead's Crossing when I moved up here, but I ended up moving into earlier in Baumgartner. The same sort of houses all smushed together. We have a clubhouse, and that sort of thing. So it just seems like it's very much the same old. So I kind of like some of the ideas that were coming up about maybe doing something different, doing more mixed use, doing something along those lines. I think the biggest issues are going to be infrastructure all around. A lot of the people in town, we don't have anything beside the specialty shops and some basic necessities. If you're going for doctor visits, or if you're going for any of the other things that you may be doing, you're going through the middle of town and you're going to Frederick or you're going to Westminster probably. I mean, maybe up to Gettysburg. So, but I would say most of the traffic, especially in the morning and afternoon, is going to be running through the middle of town there. And depending upon which way GPS has me coming home, I come through there in rush hour, and I can be on 194 coming north. I can be backed up all the way past all the businesses there, past the Fork, and all the way back. And it just kind of creeps along. But it just, I would just say that we really need to look at the infrastructure hard on this, because there just seems like there's a lot of issues that can come up and really bite us, especially if we're trying to funnel we can't really expand the square at all because you've got buildings and sidewalks right there. So we need to look at more of the overall as opposed to just the just this particular chunk. I think we need to looking at the bypass, looking at all that other things that need to come in, as well as, I mean, you were on with the water and storage and the percentages, yeah, because I mean, we've already got water that eats all of the rubber out of the faucets. So we kind of need to make sure that we're keeping that up as well. So just, like I said, just reiterating the fact that we need to be looking at this infrastructure really hard.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Anyone else? If not, we're gonna.
Hello, John Alexander, representing Mom. It's Mom's house right here. I didn't come prepared. I'm not a public speaker. It's difficult for me to do this, but I can't see any benefit out of any of this. No one's said how well this is going to support the community. It's going to impact the community negatively all around. Pollution, light pollution, traffic, of course. All this property drains to the creek. This eliminates half of this wooded area, this dense wooded area. So wildlife is going to be displaced. I just don't see any benefit out of this. Please take that in consideration with voting against this, unless it's already passed. So.
Okay. Thanks for your input.
Yep.
Anyone else? Anything from the commission?
I'm good right now.
I'm good.
If not, I'd like to thank you folks.
Thank you.
For your presentation this evening. Thank you. We'll take all this stuff for advisement. And thanks for the community for your input. And you're welcome to come to any of our meetings.
In front of it. Completely out of it.
Definitely could use cold water.
There you go.
Pardon me? On with what's on the agenda. Ordinance and agreement for review. Ordinance 09-2022, amendment to restricted general business district. And we should have something here in our packet on that. Jim or Darrell?
Just get back, okay? So the first of three amendments, that two of which we brought to the, together and took it up to the mayor and city council. And they commented, they discussed it, and now it's back to us. Are we now wanting to stay with the changes that we had talked about last? If so, that would be a suggestion to them. And it would go for, Jim, I'm not sure the process here, is it 30 days for open?
It'll be subject to a public hearing at the next mayor and council workshop. They can decide whether they want to keep it open for further comments. Probably depends upon how much interest there seems to be at the hearing.
So you're actually looking for a recommendation from us
Yeah.
to the city council?
Yes.
So, anyone have any comments they want to mention or anything before we make a,
So I'm fine with the general business district.
okay, well, let's just do one at a time, because I might have some comments.
I got, yeah, I'm going one at a time.
Okay, the general business one,
Yeah.
restricted.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay. I guess talking about this and hearing so much, I'd just like a clarification. In the general business section, restricted general business section, can a building be put on joint lots? The reason I brought that up, because remember with Sheets, that's involved, what, 4 lots, 4 different property owners? So my question is, can a building be on 2 joining lots to exceed the 5,000 square footage?
So
Or does that go to the Board of Appeals?
it speaks to one building being no larger than 5,000 square feet. Because we don't want when this was drawn up. And I understand that the Bear property is 2 lots, and I think it's 24,000 square feet between the 2 lots. The challenge is that you don't, from what I'm reading from that restriction, is that the 5,000 square foot is the largest building you want to see in that area.
When you say area, are you talking about a lot per lot? Or
In the-
what do
in
we
the
define the area?
In that district.
I don't know if that would hold up underwater. Jim,
I
or
think
would I
that's
ask
the,
Jay?
I think that's the intent of the district regulations. Now, if someone were to seek a variance and they presented to the Board of Zoning, to the Board of Appeals, that there is something unique about their circumstance that makes this property different than other ones in the district, they may be successful in obtaining a variance on that, I guess that would be considered a bulk requirement. So typically, we're looking at, area setbacks, bulk requirements for, how far from the street, how big, how tall, that sort of thing for variances. I think that would be something that a property owner could apply for with the Board of Appeals. And I'll ask the city attorney to correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah, no, you're correct in how it could do it on one lot. And to your question, Mr. Chairman, if I could get rights to a second lot that was adjoining, I could either join them together under one ownership. I wouldn't have to do that like the Sheets parcel. I could lease the lot, but I could use the area of as many lots as I can, and I could put them together and do what I want on those. So yes, you could amass lots without a problem.
And I think
Well, I realize we're trying to steer away from, what do I say, box-type stores. And I'm for that. I just soon we not have a big Kmart or something like that, or anything else in that line, in that area. But I just wanted to make sure that we could use more than one lot to justify over the 5,000.
And as far as the lot line goes and the reference to sheets, because the owners of those properties were not, basically everybody wanted to hang on to their property and enter into long-term lease arrangements rather than sell the property. And Sheets, my understanding is, prefers to lease as well. But we did make sure that, to the best of my recollection, none of the buildings actually cross a property boundary. I think there might be a corner of the canopy that overhangs a property line, but as far as anything actually built, as far as the foundations go, I think everything is within a lot line. In the event that years from now, something falls apart with the various lease agreements that are in place. And it was quite an exercise, I think, to make sure all that worked and that we didn't have a situation or wouldn't have a situation where property owner A decides not to renew the lease and property owner B wants to, and now you've got, a store that's halfway on each property. So we did work to avoid the likelihood of that.
Okay.
What was the answer?
So Jay, what was the answer again, please?
Well, the answer is that they could put properties together. So they could take two lots, and they could make it one big lot. And then they'd have more area to work with, so they wouldn't need as many variances to do what they wanted to do.
And they could go through the Board of Appeals then for this, right?
If they needed to exceed
If they
what
needed
the
to.
volume was, right?
Okay.
But Jay, in that ordinance, it says that the maximum building could be, and the business to be done there must be inside of a building, and the maximum size of the building can be 5,000 square feet. So are you
Right.
saying, can it be 10 all of a sudden, Jim, or, I mean, I
It still
certainly
has to be
see,
5,000.
Well,
Let's use an example. If you have a lot, the lots we're talking about here, they're different. They're different areas. They're different sizes. But in the past, we have allowed lots to be combined in the area of Baltimore Street, where Mr. Hale lives, in that area. Those lots are very narrow. You can combine them and build on one. But this ordinance would only allow you to build 5,000 square foot building on whatever size lot you have.
gotcha, okay.
Okay. But you might not be able to build a 5,000 square foot building on one of the small lots because of the setbacks. So you'd need variances to make that happen, or you'd have to acquire the neighboring lot or something like that. So, and you cannot get a variance to build a bigger than 5,000 square foot lot or building, because the ordinance controls that.
Okay, I'm with you. And
So
moving-
I might own 3 lots. I can still build 5,000 square feet, but I might not need any variances because I could put it into the middle, more or less.
Yes,
It's a workable lot then.
so,
But the board couldn't authorize a 9,000 square foot building.
That's correct. It's 5,000 square feet. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
but I could have multiple buildings in that same lot that didn't equal to 5,000 square feet, right?
I don't see why not.
I'm moving from the Bear property over to the LaFavor property, because we've got two situations there that could develop an issue. So am I correct on that part?
As far as the buildings go, I still think you can't exceed 5,000 square feet total.
Okay,
That's what you're saying.
Right.
But then you're going to get into a use issue, because you probably cannot have 2 separate uses on the same parcel unless they're related somehow. So I could have the building and a storage shed, 2 separate buildings, all less than 5,000 square feet on one parcel. But I couldn't have the main building and then the motorcycle repair shop out back, because they would be 2 separate uses.
all right, gotcha. Okay, I'm good with that. Thanks. Okay, you guys have any other questions? because I'm still concerned what we're going to do with the pizza shop. All right, so I guess is everyone in agreement? Or did you make a motion yet? Do we have a motion on the floor or a recommendation? Okay, I'll entertain a recommendation to go to the city council for recommendation on this, against or opposed, stated, which you,
Yeah, so I make a motion that we accept.
recommendation.
Recommendation, okay. Make a recommendation that we follow this, the red line of the restricted general business district format.
is presented
as
before us this
presented
evening.
right here.
Okay. Mr. Myers made the motion, or made the recommendation. Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in agreement, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise, carried. Thank you. The next one is ordinance 10-2022, amendment to yard exceptions. Before we do further than that, I got very confused listening to the city council, how that went through. So,
I believe we went around a bit.
you went around quite a bit, and I don't know where you got off
But
at.
I think ended up with pretty much the way it is.
Yes, but ultimately the decision was to
Yes.
keep it at 50% and 60% because people agreed that two backyards abutted versus one perpendicular to the other, that there was a difference that was appreciated in that sense. So we landed on the language as it is here.
Okay. I'll take a recommendation, unless
Well,
somebody has other comments.
I have other comments.
Okay.
So, so if I follow through the 50% reduction and everything, so if we have a 36 foot from the line, the building, right, and we 50% reduction, so that's 18 foot from the line is where you can put your fence, right?
6-foot fence, come off the building,
Yep.
18 feet.
Okay. And then, so you have 18 feet to your line then also, right? If it's 36 feet. from the line,
50%,
right?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
Whatever, yeah.
So then you'd come back 7 or 8 feet, that's your grass strip and your sidewalk and everything. So the bottom line is you're left with like 10 foot of your yard that is outside the fence.
Right.
So for me, and we talked about it before, you know, as far as what the neighbor, what's the view going to be if you bring the fence all the way out to the end? So I actually, I drove around and I saw on O'Brien and Quonset Street, so that has a 4-foot fence comes down, and then there's a 6-foot fence at the back, which is really the side yard of the next house down. I really don't see that being detrimental to that guy's vision or whatever. So what I think is important is that when you pull up to the intersection, the visibility that you have down. So, you know, you don't want the 6-foot fence up there, so, it needs to be back there away. But for me personally, if I own that property and I got to put in my fence and I got 10 foot of grass that I can't use on the outside of my fence, I think that's just not good.
Yeah, so Dan, on that fence at 11 Quonset, the fence has issues, okay? All right,
The one that is on, there, so the 4
white-
foot into the 6 foot?
Yeah, so that's one of the, so that's what got us thinking about this fence ordinance. And I'm out there telling people, look, you can't, part of the ordinance, you can go 15%, write the letters to your contiguous neighbors, and hopefully you get along with them, or they can say no. All right, then at that point, I don't believe the BOA is an option on that scenario. With what we've done is we're giving people the flexibility that you had, it was nothing, it was 4 feet, and that's all there is to it. So this gives great relief to the people that have corner lots that want more privacy. And, and not going all the way to the street with a 6-foot fence, because in most intersections, that would be very unsafe. So with that, keeping the 60%, or going out 60% or 50%, I think it's the best option so far. We put.
Well, I guess you'd have to rewrite everything, but if the issue is the visibility from the intersection, why don't you put the dimension from the intersection to where the fence is?
Well, not many, but some side yards are 40 feet, or front yards, most are 35.
Right.
You get a hodgepodge as you go around some of the other areas.
That's why you say so many feet from the intersection you're not going to obstruct the view.
Well, that's
It
why,
it can't be any closer than what the front of the house is to the intersection. So if you stay back to the front of the house, that should give you a clearance to be able to see, right?
I think so. So my only concern is that if I was putting up a fence, I'm going to put a 6-foot fence in my yard and 10 foot of it, that yard is on the outside of the fence.
right, or you can have all 4-foot fence.
Or I can have all 4-foot fence.
I mean, it's amazing. So my mother-in-law lives in Hanover, and their fence code must be the same thing as good old Taneytown, because everywhere I see it, and you see the ones, there's a fence in the 300 block of O'Brien that was put in incorrectly, A, without a permit, and then B, if they would apply for a permit or an HOA, both of us would have told him that you can't do a 6-foot fence in the corner lot the way he did it.
So this is the O'Brien and.
This is a separate fence, your first example, that fence is wrong and per code needs to be corrected on that neighboring lot.
The O'Brien and Quonset.
Yeah. So we're talking about that. I'm talking to those people.
Yeah, so when we discussed it last month, we were talking about the 6-foot fence in the guy's side yard, and you come out your front door and you see the fence there. I don't see that being an issue. That's bottom line.
Gotcha.
Okay. Any comments on this end? Okay, recommendation?
I'd like to keep it as it's currently worded after our discussion and then the mayor and council discussion.
Okay, motion, or recommendation by Lee, second by
A second.
Bill. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No. I agree with you. All right. I guess that puts me in the middle, doesn't it? So I 1, 2 for and 2 against, right?
Yeah.
You got to earn your pay.
Okay. Personally, I didn't see anything wrong with it to start with, but I'll go with the recommendation 4. Carried. But I do agree, what do I do if I 10 foot of lawn on the other side of the fence that I can't use? Yeah. But I gotta mow.
You got to mow.
All right. Ordinance 11, 2022, amendment to downtown business district. I guess I have trouble deciding what a microbrewery and a bud brewery and all that stuff is, you know? So someone will, Jim or Daryl or somebody want to talk a little bit about that?
So essentially, the current code allows by special exception microbreweries and pub breweries. And we are just adding a variety of additional alcohol-based uses such as meaderies, wineries, and distilleries as licensed by the state. So it's really just broadening the opportunity for those to locate in the downtown business district. And then by extension, everything that's permitted in the downtown district is also, this would also be a special exception in the general business district.
So doesn't the state have a term that would cover all this under one?
They do look at that, at meaderies as breweries, but that took a little research to find out. And 5 years from now, if somebody comes back with it, we figure we may as well spell it out so that,
Okay.
you know, if somebody comes back and we're in different roles or something, the next person won't have to do any digging.
Okay. Comments? If not, recommendation?
Recommend to approve as is. I appreciate the increased opportunity for small business in the area.
That's a good idea.
Second by Chris. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Carried. Planning and zoning report. Daryl, your report?
So, as you all know, the MPCA conference training happened late October. It'll be the same, probably around the same week next year, so if you plan ahead, it's normally 2 days. Not quite sure where I heard it's going to be next year, but it won't be, as close as it was in Frederick, of course. I wrote a letter about Garnet Ridge and some of the observations from the planning office about some of the things in their concept site plan. And it sort of suggests going forward that when a concept site plan comes in, we not vote on it that first time. You just give it a chance to, to get people thinking. And what we gave the CSLI tonight was probably 100 hours worth of work. So it's gonna be a while till they get it together, but we're getting better opportunity and whatnot. The bike trail thing is huge. And it would be nice if that and our roadway get through another parcel. So from the letter, and I'm not gonna read each line, but historically, different planning commissions have not made the alleys happen. And alleys are one of the things that can go into a community village. They don't have to. Nothing has to, but most of those things should. The community center, different types of housing, whether it be condos. We're looking at duplexes and triplexes, if you will. What about condos? When we have these kind of discussions, it's helpful to have those. Maybe they're just maybe a condo is not what these people want. I know that Carroll Vista's got some pretty large downsizing houses at 30-some hundred square feet. I know my mother would not want that much square footage. But anyway, in any case, Carroll Vista, that was the first community village we had here. It doesn't look, it looks a good bit like a community village, but not really. The backloaded housing garages is really not, from what I've been hearing from the builders, what age targeted or especially senior housing, senior living housing is not really what they want. So I can see how things have changed on that aspect of it. Then we're starting to see a lot of what we are starting to see a lot of, because the alleys were initial in Meads, going back to Carroll Vista. You normally don't require alleys on a different zone type property. Like if your buildable lot backs to another property, alleys in the back are not really recommended. So that's one requirement. So Garnet Ridge fits that bill exactly. I don't think Sewell's does, but the other thing to think about is they're coming in here. A lot of these developments come in with small roads, small streets. The street that Lee lives on is very narrow. We had one person decided it'd be really a good idea to park on that street. Well, two lanes can't move past each other. They can on a 20-foot or a 22-foot street. But if one person parks, then the other person's going out in the traffic. Again, you're not going 60 miles an hour theoretically, because it's in the middle of a townhouse, but it creates that problem. So with the streets coming in at 24 feet and what have you, I think that Garnet Ridge is 26.8 feet wide. So you can't park on those streets either, not for two travel lanes. So we have to really be paying attention to these street widths, because it seems to be that's what's happening a lot. We're not doing alleys. Well, Meads is a 20-foot street on Jack or what have you. Okay, so we got to be looking for that. So these are the things that that really stick out. Garnet Ridge, there's a lot of wetland and wetland buffering challenges. So, that's another reason why they can't do as many good things there. I did notice on that plan, and on the one drawing that he had up here tonight, the conceptual, The fire rings are a big deal, and they're huge. So they're not allowed in town either, so, per code. In any case, that's all I have. Any questions on that letter?
No comments, Jim?
The only question I had, so when they came in here the first time, they said they were gonna have parking on one side, right? Isn't that what they told us? I thought they said.
I don't,
Don't remember.
I don't believe so.
I don't remember that either, but that's.
Okay, that's fine. So, how many parking spots do you have to have for a unit? So they have like 2 off-street or 3 off-street, or?
I want to say for a retirement dwelling, it's only 2 per dwelling.
2 per dwelling?
It's for a conventional single-family house, it's 3 per dwelling.
Does that count like 1 in the garage?
Yeah.
2. Yeah, the 2.
Yeah.
Off street.
Right. And maybe just to elaborate a little bit on the community village aspect of Garnet Ridge, maybe in contrast to Meads Crossing or Carroll Vista or the Sewell Farm. So with Carroll Vista, the retirement dwellings were not required to have the rear alleys. That was, explained to, and I believe they went to the Board of Appeals in that case for relief of the rear-loaded garages. And that was granted. But they did stick to shorter driveway lengths to encourage vehicle parking in the garages instead of out, in the driveway, essentially, in front of the house, where you see parked cars in front of every house. So Carroll Vista did stick to a lot of the design aesthetic of Community Village, and there are very few lots at Carroll Vista that actually abut, where one rear yard abuts another. There's typically at least a ribbon of open space in between most of the units out there. Garnet Ridge is a little closer to that aesthetic, I think, than we ended up with Meads Crossing. Again, Garnet Ridge they are retirement dwellings, but it looks like, and things aren't dimensioned on that concept plan, so, with the line thickness, when you put a scale on it, you could be off a couple feet. But it looks like they've followed a little bit more of the community village aesthetic with the shorter driveways to encourage parking in the garage and things like that. What we saw with Meads Crossing was basically use of the Development Rights and Responsibilities Agreement to circumvent a lot of the community village design criteria. And just from looking at the Sewell concept, I think they've kind of taken a page out of the Meads Crossing playbook because they have similar parking facilities and similar, front-loaded product, and of course, no alleys. And again, where previous commissions have never required alleys to be along the perimeter of the property where they would only serve houses on one side, even the original Meads Crossing, when they did have alleys, they weren't required to do alleys around the perimeter. And that's kind of the layout for Garnet Ridge, where most of those units are, it's a relatively narrow property. So design-wise, alleys may not really make sense there. But it's something we're supposed to contemplate, and we can offer relief from the alleys, but it's not supposed to be the standard. So a project like Garnet Ridge, maybe it makes more sense to not require the alleys there because it's a small parcel, and most of the units, because of the wetlands and things, are pushed out to the perimeter. But it's something that we should be considering when we look at a community village design, at least at this point. If the mayor and council decide to modify the code, that may not be an issue going forward. But right now, something that really we need to be thinking about.
Okay. Anything else on? All right. I guess the next thing, moving on to the active project list.
All right, so the only other thing I have for my report, Jim, would be 2 letters for on Bollinger Park. that thing just really can't get through. We're waiting on a variance. We're waiting on a variance, and I think one other letter with grading. Other than that, nothing else.
Move on to the construction phases. Anything there?
That, again, I have nothing else on the construction phase projects.
Okay, I thought we talked, or you mentioned last month that some of these projects will be coming off the list soon. We
That
hope.
was the month before.
Oh, was that the month before?
Yeah, that's the month before.
Well, they're still here.
No, 6 and 7 is still viable.
Okay, right.
Sheets, they've never gotten back to us. I don't know which other ones you're talking about, but
Well, just go down the list. You said sheets. Jump to the next one, FAPCO. What's happening with, are they buying some more property? Or town thinking about annexing something else? Or what's the story with VAPCO and their development?
we haven't been.
You haven't been included?
Sorry?
Yeah, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they haven't, we haven't talked to them in a while. I'm not really sure what they're doing there.
We'll be meeting with economic development folks from Carroll County to try to update each other on the status of that. EVAPCO's been having conversations with the city as well as the county and the state from an economic development perspective, and we're all trying to get on the same page at this point. They've certainly expressed concern about the cost of benefit assessments for the water and sewer capacity that they would need for a future development of that property. There's been discussion of annexing versus not annexing and what that would look like for them to develop the property down the road. There's a lot of moving parts with this one. All of our potential Antrim Boulevard bypass alignments cross this property at some point, and EVAPCO is aware of that. So there's a lot we need to figure out on this.
It appears that keeping EVAPCO within the city corporations would be a benefit to the city of Taneytown.
Sure.
So,
But there's also concern of if the city sponsors or foots the bill for providing infrastructure for growth, especially on a property we don't own. There is a school of thought that suggests that cities or towns could be more like a developer in that, you acquire a property, develop it, and then sell the parcels at a premium after you've added infrastructure. That's not the conventional way of approaching things. Typically, we let somebody else develop it and, pay for all the infrastructure. But there are a lot of questions with EVAPCO right now as far as, how we're going to serve the property, who pays for water and sewer to get out there, and, a lot of questions and not so many answers yet.
but that is a fairly clean and industrial, manufacturing company.
Sure.
I think it's a benefit for the city of Taneytown to
Sure.
do what
Oh,
we can do.
we would absolutely love to annex the parcel and have them develop, within the city limits, absolutely. We just need to be able to come to agreement on what that's going to look like.
But then you're creating Ireland, those 5 houses that are incorporated.
And that's been discussed as well. Yep. So we're well aware of that and how the annexation plat would have to be drawn to not create that problem. So it might be annexing up to the backs of the houses on Crouse Mill Road and then, going around them, but stopping at Crouse Mill Road so that we don't create an enclave issue.
Okay. And it looks like the Duffy project out there is moving right along too. Yes, it is. Yep. Actually, I did part of your stuff there, so, all right. I guess we can move on into Jay with the legal update.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, as stated earlier, the hearing on the 3 ordinances that you just made your recommendation on will be heard by the council on December 7th. It's likely that if there isn't any major opposition or changes, that they'll adopt that the following Monday, and then there's a waiting period before it becomes effective. So by the new year, those new ordinances should be effective. We've been working on issues regarding sewer capacity. They're not quite ready for prime time yet, but that's going to have an impact that you're going to need to know about. The council's going to need to know about. It's along the lines of what you've already heard, but we're getting more specifics on that. Eventually, there'll be something that the city staff and I will be putting together that will give you an idea of where we're headed with sewer capacity and possibly putting in some I'd say targets, but at least some mileposts, so you know where we are when you start approving things and how that'll affect it. So that plays into what you were talking about earlier tonight. Unless you have any questions, that's all I have.
Any questions for the attorney?
Nope.
All right, thank you, Jay.
Okay.
Anything from Tiffany, since she's not gonna be here, not here this evening and on vacation or whatever?
All I got was out of office.
Yeah. All right, old business. New business. You guys in favor of moving that to next month?
Yes, I didn't have an opportunity to review it.
Okay, you have to stay after class then. Okay, moving on. Anyone have any issues, any questions, anything?
Nope.
Anything from the floor? Anybody have any comments or anything want to bring before us?
Well, while we still have a little bit of an audience, and we probably should have done this while the room was a little bit more packed, but there were some things brought up during Sewell this evening that I think you guys could do a little better job tooting your own horn. For example, we talked about the bike trail idea. We've hashed that out. When Meads Crossing was through, we had them modify their trail network so that if the rail trail ever did come through, there'd be a point of connection for it. We've now, folks seem to forget that from Angel Road down to downtown, it's an active rail line and not particularly, subject to a rail to trail project at this point in time. But you guys, have approved the bike and pedestrian master plan that has those connections, that has the idea of the trail network following Piney Creek. So it's not, those are good ideas, but they're ideas that we've talked about and we've implemented, plans to get them on the books. So I think sometimes folks don't give the city enough credit for thinking of some of these things when we have had those conversations and we do have plans in the works for things like that. So just food for thought, I guess.
All right. In the past, we've been skipping the December meeting. If we want to have one or need to have one, we need to think about maybe the 19th, not the 26th, or move to January. Nobody wants to have a meeting right after Christmas. And so do you think we're going to have something on the agenda for December 19th?
Well, can we have a date just in case something does pop up? I'll go with a no meeting, but if something does pop up, don't hold anybody up.
Okay. Or since January is a long month, nobody wants it the 2nd, if we have it the 9th, and then we have 1, 2, 3 weeks later, we have another one. So you're probably right. We probably, it would suit everybody, we'll put down for the 19th and take it from there. Good? Okay.
If needed.
If needed. And we would like to know that at least 2 weeks before that.
Fair enough.
Okay?
Far from now.
Pardon me?
It's not too far from now.
I know it's not. All right. With that, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Okay, motion made by Lee, second by Chris. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed likewise, carried. Thank you, folks, and thanks everyone out there for showing up tonight. Remember, we're here every month.